Captain Zrix's mandibles clicked nervously as he reviewed the emergency briefing on his datapad. 3 cycles ago, the Galactic Council had issued Directive 7749, immediate evacuation of all non-essential personnel from Kepler 442b due to what the xenobiologists termed a catastrophic predator emergence. The planet's apex predator, the Void Stalker, had awakened from its century-long hibernation cycle. "Sir," chittered Communications Officer Velt, his carapace trembling, "we're receiving a distress signal from the Human Research Station." Zrix's compound eyes widened. Humans. Of all species to be stranded on a death world during a Void Stalker emergence, it had to be humans. The Council's files on humanity were concerning. Labeled as Death World survivors and persistence predators, humans had only recently joined the Galactic Federation, and most civilized species gave them a wide berth. "Put them through," Zrix ordered, steeling himself for what he assumed would be panicked pleas for evacuation. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a tall, broad-shouldered human male with graying hair and calm blue eyes. He wore a simple research jumpsuit and was sipping what appeared to be a hot beverage. "This is Dr. James Harrison, Kepler Research Station Alpha. We received your evacuation advisory, but we're going to have to decline." Zrix's mandibles dropped. "Dr. Harrison, surely you don't understand the severity." "Oh, we understand just fine," Harrison interrupted with a slight smile. "But here's the thing, Captain." "Zrix. Captain Zrix of the Federation vessel Peaceful Dawn. Captain Zrix, we've been monitoring the seismic activity for weeks. Something big is moving down there, and frankly, we're curious." Harrison took another sip of his beverage. "Tell me, how big are we talking exactly?" The bridge fell silent except for the nervous clicking of chitin. Zrix felt his secondary heart skip a beat. The human had just asked the question that no sane being should ever ask about a Void Stalker. "Dr. Harrison," Zrix began slowly, "the mature Void Stalker measures approximately 847 meters in length, stands 200 meters at the shoulder, and possesses acidic breath capable of melting through reinforced hull plating. Its hunting territory spans entire continents. The recommended protocol is immediate evacuation to a minimum safe distance of 3 star systems." There was a pause. Then, to Zrix's absolute horror, Dr. Harrison's face broke into a wide grin. 847 meters? That's incredible. Boys, you hearing this? The camera panned to show 2 other humans in the background. A younger man with dark hair and excited eyes, clearly a xenobiologist by his equipment-laden vest, and an older, weathered man who looked like he'd wrestled asteroids for fun. "Copy that, Doc," called the weathered man. "Tommy's already breaking out the heavy scanners." "This is Dr. Tommy Chun," Harrison began. "Actually, Doc," the younger man interrupted. "It's Dr. Thomas Williams now. Remember? Fresh start, new colony, new name registration mix-up with the bureaucrats." Harrison chuckled. "Right, sorry. Dr. Thomas Williams, our xenobiology specialist, and Jake Morrison, our geological survey chief and resident. Well, Jake handles things that need handling." Jake Morrison gave a casual wave that somehow managed to look threatening. Captain Zrix's primary brain struggled to process what he was witnessing. 3 humans, informed about a planet-killing apex predator, were not screaming, running, or begging for rescue. They were excited. "Gentlemen," Zrix tried again, his voice climbing several octaves, "you don't seem to understand. The Void Stalker has eliminated entire civilizations. It's not something you study. It's something you flee from in absolute terror while praying to whatever gods you worship that it doesn't notice you." Dr. Harrison nodded thoughtfully. Right. But see, Captain, that's exactly why we need to stay. Humanity's xenobiology database is embarrassingly sparse on apex predators of this scale. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to die horribly, Zrix squeaked. "Maybe," Harrison admitted with a shrug, "but think of the data we could collect. Tommy's been working on some theories about predator-prey relationships in extreme environments. And Jake here has some ideas about defensive positioning that might interest you." Jake Morrison stepped forward, and even through the hologram, His presence seemed to fill the bridge of Zrix's ship. "Captain, with respect, your evacuation protocol assumes the predator can't be dealt with. What if that assumption's wrong?" "Dealt with?" Velt whispered from his station, his mandibles chattering uncontrollably. "Sure," Jake continued casually. "Every predator has weaknesses. Size like that is impressive, but it's also a logistics problem. Takes a lot of energy to move something that big. Probably has to eat constantly, which means predictable hunting patterns. And that acidic breath? Hot gases rise. Atmospheric dispersion follows predictable models." Dr. Williams, Tommy, bounced excitedly beside him. "Plus, if it's been hibernating for a century, its muscle memory is going to be off. Neural pathways need time to fully reactivate after extended dormancy. We might have a window where its reaction times are slower." Harrison nodded approvingly. "See what I mean? The boys have been thinking about this." Zrix felt his sanity slipping away like atmosphere through a hull breach. The humans weren't just staying, they were planning to engage with the Void Stalker. On purpose. For science. "Dr. Harrison," he managed weakly, "I'm required by Federation law to inform you that the Void Stalker emergence will begin in approximately 72 standard hours. At that time, this entire planetary system will be declared a quarantine zone. We cannot provide rescue services once the exclusion zone is established." "Understood, Captain. We appreciate the heads up." "And Dr. Harrison?" "The Galactic Council's xenobiology database lists 14 species that went extinct trying to study Void Stalkers." Harrison's grin widened. "Well then, Captain, I guess we'll be the first to succeed." Harrison out. The transmission ended, leaving Zrix staring at a blank hologram display while his crew made various sounds of distress and disbelief. "Sir," Velt ventured after a long moment. "Orders." Captain Zrix looked around his bridge at his crew of sensible, rational beings who understood that when something could kill you, the appropriate response was to run away very quickly. "Set course for the edge of the system," he ordered. And prepare a monitoring station. If these insane primates somehow survive, the Council will want a full report." As the peaceful dawn began its retreat to what the rest of the galaxy considered a safe distance, Zrix couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to witness something that would fundamentally change how the Federation viewed both Void Stalkers and humans. He was absolutely right, though not in the way he expected. 71 hours and 37 minutes before Void Stalker emergence, Dr. James Harrison stood in the main lab of Kepler Research Station Alpha, watching his colleagues work with the calm efficiency that had made their team legendary back on Earth. Tommy Williams hunched over a bank of monitors, xenobiological data streaming across multiple screens. His fingers flew over the keyboard as he compiled everything the Federation databases contained about Void Stalkers, cross-referencing it with Earth's own predator studies. "Doc," Tommy called without looking up, "I'm seeing some interesting patterns. The galactic species that got wiped out, they all followed the same basic strategy." "Which was?" Harrison asked, settling into a chair with his perpetual cup of coffee. "Run away and hope it doesn't chase them." Tommy finally turned around, his eyes bright with the kind of excitement that made other species nervous. "But look at this metabolic data. An 847-meter predator? On a planet with this gravity and atmospheric density? The caloric requirements are astronomical." Jake Morrison looked up from where he was assembling what appeared to be a very large rifle. "How astronomical?" Tommy pulled up a holographic display. "Conservatively, it needs to consume roughly 50,000 kilograms of biomass per day just to maintain basic functions. During active hunting periods, probably double that. So it's basically a mobile extinction event that's always hungry," Harrison observed. "What else?" "Here's the interesting part," Tommy continued, manipulating the display to show the planet's ecosystem. "Kepler 442b doesn't have enough large fauna to support that kind of caloric demand. The Void Stalker has to be supplementing its diet somehow." Jake finished assembling his rifle and set it aside. "Supplementing how?" "Mineral consumption," Tommy said triumphantly. "Look at the geological surveys. Every place a Void Stalker has been spotted, there are corresponding mineral depletion zones. It's not just a predator. It's a lithophage. It eats rocks to supplement its organic diet. Harrison raised an eyebrow. That's actually brilliant. Explains how something that size can survive century-long hibernation cycles. It doesn't just sleep, it literally feeds off the planet itself. Which brings us to the tactical situation, Jake said, pulling up his own set of displays. If it needs to consume mineral deposits regularly, its movement patterns aren't random. It follows geological features. The three men gathered around Jake's topographical display of the surrounding area. Red lines traced mineral veins through the continental shelf, with particular concentrations around volcanic activity and rare earth deposits. Our station, Jake pointed to their location, is sitting right on top of one of the richest mineral veins on the continent. So it's coming here, Harrison stated calmly. Oh, it's definitely coming here, Jake confirmed. But that's good news. Tommy stared at him. How is that possibly good news? Jake's weathered face cracked into a grin that would have sent Federation Marines running for cover. Because it means we don't have to hunt it. It's coming to us, following a predictable path, probably already committed to a specific approach route based on the mineral concentrations. He traced a line on the map with his finger. Based on the geological data, it'll most likely emerge from the karstlands, follow the mineral vein through the Sunset Canyon, and arrive at our doorstep in approximately 6 hours after emergence. Time enough to prepare a proper welcome, Harrison mused. Speaking of which, Tommy interjected. I've been thinking about Captain Zrix's description. Acidic breath that can melt through starship hulls. Yeah, that's not actually breath. It's probably a specialized digestive enzyme that's been adapted for defense, which means it has specific chemical properties we can potentially neutralize. Jake looked interested. Neutralize how? Tommy pulled up another display, this one showing complex chemical formulas. Basic chemistry. If it's acidic enough to melt metal, it's probably somewhere in the 0 to 1 pH range. Hit it with a strong enough base and you get neutralization. Plus heat, gas expansion, and if we're lucky, some very unpleasant sensory feedback for our toothy friend. You want to give it indigestion, Harrison said with approval. I want to give it the worst case of acid reflux in geological history, Tommy corrected. Jake was already moving toward his equipment locker. What kind of base are we talking about? And how much? Well, Tommy said thoughtfully, given the probable volume of enzyme it can project, we'd need several hundred liters of concentrated sodium hydroxide to achieve meaningful neutralization. We've got a water treatment plant, Harrison pointed out. Industrial-grade chemical processing equipment. Jake emerged from his locker carrying what appeared to be a military-grade launcher. And we've got delivery systems. The three men looked at each other for a moment, the implications sinking in. We're really going to do this, Tommy said quietly. Damn right we are, Jake confirmed. Harrison raised his coffee cup in a mock toast. Gentlemen, to the stupidest scientific endeavor in human history. To the stupidest scientific endeavor in human history, they echoed. Meanwhile, 847 kilometers below the surface, something vast and ancient stirred in its mineral cocoon. Seismic sensors across 3 continents registered the tremor as the Void Stalker began its final awakening phase. In deep caverns that had remained undisturbed for over a century, massive eyes opened for the first time in living memory. The hunt was about to begin. The ground began shaking at 0347 local time. Dr. James Harrison felt it first as a subtle vibration in his coffee cup, the dark liquid developing tiny standing waves that grew progressively larger. He was in the station's observation tower, having given up on sleep hours ago in favor of monitoring the seismic readings. Doc. Jake Morrison's voice crackled over the comm. You seeing this? Harrison glanced at the seismic display. The readings had gone from periodic tremors to a steady, rhythmic pulse. It's moving. Big time. Tommy's geological sensors are going crazy. Whatever's down there, it's following the mineral vein exactly like we predicted. Through the observation tower's reinforced windows, Harrison could see the first signs of the Void Stalkers' approach. In the distance, the Karstlands, a region of limestone formations and underground caverns, were collapsing in a perfectly straight line, as if something massive was tunneling directly beneath them. Jake, Tommy, get to positions. It'll be here in less than an hour. Harrison made his way down to the station's main level, where Tommy Williams was making final adjustments to their improvised chemical delivery system. The young xenobiologist had spent the last 2 days converting their water treatment facility into what he cheerfully called the galaxy's largest antacid dispenser. Status report, Tommy? All good, document. We've got 800 liters of concentrated sodium hydroxide in the delivery tanks, plus another 300 liters of backup solution. Jake's launcher system is calibrated for maximum dispersal pattern. Tommy paused, wiping sweat from his forehead. There's just one problem. Which is, we only get one shot. Maybe 2 if we're really lucky and Jake's backup systems work. After that, we're down to harsh language and pointed sticks. Harrison nodded grimly. The plan was simple in concept but terrifying in execution. When the Void Stalker emerged, it would almost certainly attempt to clear the area of threats using its acidic breath weapon. That would be their window, the moment when its mouth was open and vulnerable to their chemical counterstrike. The ground shook again, this time hard enough to rattle equipment on the lab benches. Movement on the perimeter sensors. Jake's voice announced over the comm he was positioned in the station's reinforced bunker, surrounded by enough firepower to level a small city. Whatever's coming, it's about 200 meters out and closing fast. Harrison climbed back up to the observation tower, Tommy close behind. In the distance, they could see the Earth bulging upward in a long line, as if a submarine was surfacing through solid rock. Trees toppled as the ground beneath them shifted and cracked. My God, Tommy breathed. It's bigger than the databases indicated. He was right. As the Void Stalker began to emerge, it became clear that the Federation's measurements had been conservative. The creature that pulled itself from the Earth was easily over 900 meters long, its bulk so massive that it seemed to have its own gravitational field. The Void Stalker's head emerged first, a nightmarish fusion of crocodilian jaw and insectoid mandibles, covered in mineral deposits that had fused to its hide during its century of underground hibernation. Dozens of eyes, each the size of a vehicle, blinked in the unfamiliar daylight. Jake, Harrison said calmly into his communicator. You seeing this? Oh, I'm seeing it. Also recording it. Tommy's going to want the footage for his research. The creature's body followed its head segment after segment of armored hide, clawed legs, and what appeared to be specialized feeding appendages designed for mineral extraction. When it finally stood fully upright, it towered nearly 250 meters above the research station. It's beautiful, Tommy whispered, and Harrison had to admit the kid had a point. Despite being essentially a living extinction event, there was something magnificent about the Void Stalker's sheer scale and alien design. The creature's multiple eyes swept the area, finally focusing on the research station. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, human and Void Stalker regarded each other across the distance. Then the creature opened its mouth. The sound that emerged was unlike anything in Harrison's experience. Part roar, part industrial machinery, part geological event. The observation tower's windows cracked despite their reinforcement, and Harrison felt the sound as much as heard it, vibrating through his bones and organs. That's our cue, Harrison announced. Tommy, initiate chemical delivery on my mark. Jake, prepare backup systems. The Void Stalker's throat began to glow with an ominous green light as it prepared to deploy its acidic breath weapon. Corrosive mist began seeping from between its teeth. Now, Harrison shouted. Tommy's delivery system activated with a sound like a small explosion. 800 liters of concentrated sodium hydroxide launched through the air in a wide dispersal pattern, aimed directly at the Void Stalker's open mouth. The chemical cloud struck just as the creature exhaled its acidic breath. The reaction was immediate and spectacular. Where base met acid, violent neutralization occurred, producing clouds of superheated steam, expanding gases, and what Harrison could only describe as the loudest sizzling sound in geological history. The Void Stalker's roar cut off abruptly, replaced by what sounded distinctly like coughing. The massive creature shook its head violently, acidic drool spattering the landscape as it tried to clear its mouth and throat. Direct hit, Tommy shouted triumphantly. Chemical neutralization successful. It's working, Jake reported from his bunker. The thing looks confused as hell. The Void Stalker was indeed confused. It had awakened expecting to find the usual small, fleeing prey that populated most worlds. Instead, it had encountered something that not only didn't flee, but had somehow managed to turn its primary weapon against it. The creature took a step closer to the station, its massive head tilting as it studied the structure with new interest. This was clearly not normal prey behavior. Harrison keyed his communicator. Phase 1 successful. Moving to Phase 2. Doc, Tommy said nervously. What exactly is Phase 2? Harrison smiled, the expression somehow managing to be both reassuring and terrifying. Phase 2, Tommy, is where we see if this thing is as smart as I think it is. He walked to the communication array and activated the station's external speakers, broadcasting on multiple frequencies. Hello there, he said calmly, his voice echoing across the landscape. We're not your usual prey, are we? The Void Stalker's multiple eyes focused intently on the source of the sound. For a moment, creature and human studied each other in silence. Then, to everyone's amazement, the creature responded. Not with words, but with a pattern of bioluminescent flashes along its hide, complex, rhythmic, and unmistakably communicative. Tommy, Harrison said softly, please tell me you're recording this. Every second document, and running it through the translation matrix. Harrison looked up at the massive alien predator that was apparently trying to communicate with them. Well, he murmured, this is about to get interesting. The translation matrix worked faster than Tommy had dared hope. Within minutes of the Void Stalker's first bioluminescent communication attempt, patterns began emerging on his screens. Doc, I think it's trying to establish basic mathematical concepts, Tommy reported, his voice tight with excitement. The light patterns, they're showing prime numbers, then geometric sequences. It's testing our intelligence. Harrison nodded, unsurprised. Respond with the Fibonacci sequence. Let's see what happens. Tommy quickly programmed the station's external lights to flash the famous mathematical progression. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21. The Void Stalker's response was immediate. Its bioluminescent patches flashed in what could only be described as approval, followed by increasingly complex mathematical concepts. Jake, Harrison called over the comm. How are you doing down there? Confused as hell, Doc. But the big guy hasn't tried to eat us yet, so I'm calling it a win. You want me to stand down the heavy artillery? Keep it ready, but don't power down. We're in uncharted territory here. Over the next hour, the exchange between human and Void Stalker evolved from basic mathematics to more complex concepts. The creature demonstrated understanding of physics, chemistry, and what appeared to be advanced geological engineering principles. It's not just intelligent, Tommy marveled, watching the patterns flow across his screens. It's highly intelligent, maybe more so than us. Makes sense, Harrison mused. Something that lives for millennia and has survived multiple extinction events would have to be. The question is, what does it want? As if responding to his query, the Void Stalker's communication shifted. The bioluminescent patterns now showed what appeared to be star charts, with specific systems highlighted. Tommy's translation software struggled with the complexity, but gradually, a picture emerged. Doc, Tommy said slowly, I think it's showing us its hunting history. These star systems, they match the Federation databases for worlds where Void Stalkers have appeared. Harrison studied the display. All of them dead worlds now. Yeah, but look at this. Tommy highlighted a specific pattern. It's not showing conquest or destruction. It's showing rescue operations. The revelation hit them both simultaneously. The Void Stalker wasn't showing them its hunting grounds. It was showing them worlds it had tried to save. Harrison keyed the external communicators again. You're not a predator, are you? You're a planetary custodian. The creature's entire body pulsed with bioluminescent acknowledgement. Tommy, pull up the geological surveys of those dead worlds. Cross-reference with the Federation extinction reports. As the data compiled, a disturbing pattern emerged. Every world the Federation attributed to Void Stalker attacks showed the same geological signatures: catastrophic mineral depletion, ecosystem collapse, and environmental poisoning. They weren't killed by Void Stalkers, Tommy breathed. They were already dying when the Void Stalkers arrived. The question is, Harrison said grimly, what was killing them? The answer came in the form of another light pattern from the Void Stalker. This time, the images were unmistakable. Mining operations, industrial extraction, systematic resource exploitation. Strip mining. Jake's voice came over the comm. He had been monitoring their conversation from his bunker. Industrial-scale resource extraction. Someone's been following these things around, mining worlds to death after they leave. Harrison felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. The Federation evacuation protocols. They're not protecting people from Void Stalkers. They're clearing worlds for mining operations. Doc, Tommy said urgently, look at this. He had overlaid the Void Stalker star charts with current Federation evacuation orders. The correlation was perfect. Every world currently under evacuation order was rich in rare minerals and showed early signs of the ecological stress patterns they'd identified. Including Kepler 442b, Harrison said quietly. The Void Stalker's head lowered until it was level with their observation tower. Up close, Harrison could see that what he'd initially taken for mineral deposits on its hide were actually symbiotic organisms, living sensors that allowed it to monitor planetary health on a molecular level. The creature's eyes, each one larger than their entire station, showed an intelligence that was ancient, patient, and utterly alien, but not malevolent. You're trying to heal the worlds, Harrison said. Not really a question. The bioluminescent response was complex, but Tommy's translation software had learned enough of the creature's communication patterns to provide a rough interpretation. Heal what can be healed. Preserve what can be preserved. Remember what is lost. And the civilizations that died? This time, the response showed images that made Harrison's blood run cold. Evacuation ships leaving worlds, but instead of carrying refugees to safety, they carried mineral extraction equipment back to the dying planets. They weren't evacuating people, Jake said, his voice deadly quiet. They were abandoning them to die while they stripped the worlds bare. And when the Void Stalkers tried to intervene, Tommy began. They got blamed for the extinctions, Harrison finished. The three humans stood in silence, processing the magnitude of what they'd discovered. The Federation, or at least some part of it, was systematically destroying worlds under cover of protecting them from the very creatures trying to save them. Doc, Jake's voice was carefully controlled. We've got incoming ships. Long-range sensors show at least 12 vessels approaching from the outer system. Harrison looked up at the Void Stalker, whose bioluminescent patterns now showed urgent warnings. Mining fleet, he asked. The creature's confirmation was unmistakable. Harrison keyed his communicator to the broadest possible frequency. Captain Zrix, this is Dr. Harrison. If you're monitoring this transmission, you need to know that everything the Federation has told you about Void Stalkers is a lie. Static filled the comm channel for several seconds before Zrix's voice emerged, tight with what sounded like fear. Dr. Harrison, long-range sensors show you're still alive. How is that possible? Because, Harrison replied, looking directly into the Void Stalker's nearest eye. We're not dealing with a predator, Captain. We're dealing with someone who's been trying to save worlds from the real predators. And Captain, Harrison added, watching the approaching ships grow larger on the horizon. The real predators just arrived. The mining fleet that emerged from hyperspace was nothing like the elegant Federation vessels Harrison had expected. These were industrial monsters, massive, angular ships designed for resource extraction rather than exploration. Their hulls were scarred by countless operations, and their weapon arrays were clearly built for overwhelming firepower rather than precision. 12 ships, Jake reported from his position in the bunker. Heavy mining equipment, but also enough firepower to slag a continent. They're not taking any chances this time, The lead ship opened communications immediately, bypassing Captain Zrix's peaceful dawn entirely. Human researchers, this is Admiral Korax of the Mineral Consortium. You have 30 standard minutes to evacuate before we begin termination operations. Harrison exchanged glances with Tommy, who was still monitoring the Void Stalker's bioluminescent communications. The massive creature had gone still, its attention focused on the approaching fleet. Admiral Korax, Harrison replied. This is Dr. James Harrison, senior researcher. Before you begin your termination operations, you should know that we've established communication with the Void Stalker. It's not a predator. It's a planetary conservation system. The response was immediate and dismissive. Dr. Harrison, you've clearly suffered psychological damage from proximity to the creature. Void Stalkers are Class 12 extinction threats. There can be no communication with such entities. Funny thing about that, Tommy interjected, patching into the communication channel. I've just transmitted our complete translation matrix and recorded communications to the Federation Science Council, the Galactic Ethics Committee, and about 40 different news networks across 7 star systems. There was a long pause before Admiral Korax responded, his voice noticeably colder. Dr. Williams, you have interfered with a legitimate resource extraction operation authorized under Emergency Directive 7749. This constitutes an act of terrorism against lawful Federation commerce. Resource extraction? Harrison laughed, but there was no humor in it. You mean strip mining a living world under the pretense of protecting it from the very entity trying to preserve it. Meanwhile, Captain Zrix's voice cut through on a separate channel. Dr. Harrison, whatever you've discovered, the mining fleet has weapons capable of destroying everything within a 1,000-kilometer radius. You need to leave. Now. Harrison looked up at the Void Stalker, whose massive head was now tracking the incoming ships with predatory intensity. The creature's bioluminescent patterns had shifted to what Tommy's translation software identified as combat readiness indicators. Captain Zrix, Harrison said calmly, I don't think our friend here is planning to run. As if responding to his words, the Void Stalker rose to its full height and opened its mouth. But instead of the acidic breath weapon they'd witnessed earlier, something else emerged. A sound that registered below human hearing but made the very air itself vibrate with harmonic resonance. Seismic activity, Jake reported, his voice tight. Major seismic activity. Whatever that thing just did, it's waking up the entire continental shelf. Across the landscape, the ground began to bulge in dozens of locations. The Void Stalker's call had been answered. Tommy, Harrison said urgently, how many Void Stalkers are there on this planet? Tommy's fingers flew over his instruments, correlating the seismic data with their earlier geological surveys. Based on the mineral vein network and hibernation sites. Oh my God, Doc, there are at least 7 of them. Maybe more. The mining fleet's formation began to shift as their sensors detected the multiple emergences. Admiral Korax's voice crackled over the communications array, no longer dismissive but clearly concerned. All units, assume attack formation. Prepare for immediate planetary bombardment. Admiral, Harrison cut in. If you attack this world, you'll be committing genocide. These creatures are trying to preserve the planetary ecosystem. They're the galaxy's environmental guardians. Dr. Harrison, step away from the creature and prepare for immediate extraction. That's an order. Harrison looked at Tommy and Jake, both of whom had taken positions beside him in the observation tower. Below them, the original Void Stalker maintained its protective stance over the research station. I'm afraid we're going to have to decline that order, Admiral. The mining fleet opened fire. The bombardment that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. 12 heavily armed ships unleashed enough firepower to crack a small moon, all focused on the emerging Void Stalkers. The result was spectacular and utterly unexpected. Instead of dying under the barrage, the Void Stalkers began to sing. The harmonic resonance they produced interacted with the planet's mineral structure in ways that Federation science had never encountered. The incoming energy weapons were absorbed, redirected, and transformed into something else entirely. A planetary-scale defensive field that turned Kepler 442b into the galaxy's largest musical instrument. The mineral deposits, Tommy shouted over the incredible sound. They're acting as resonance chambers. The entire planet is becoming a giant harmonic amplifier. The mining fleet's weapons fire was not only ineffective, it was making the Void Stalkers stronger. Each energy blast fed more power into the planetary resonance system, and with each passing moment, the defensive field grew more sophisticated. Admiral Corax's fleet found themselves trapped in what could only be described as a planetary-scale sonic cage. Their ships were undamaged but completely immobilized, held in place by harmonic forces that their science couldn't even begin to understand. "This is impossible." Admiral Corax's voice crackled over the comm, filled with disbelief. "No, Admiral," Harrison replied, watching 7 Void Stalkers coordinate their song with the precision of a cosmic orchestra. "This is evolution. The Void Stalkers aren't just individual creatures. They're components of a planet-wide conservation system. They've been doing this for millions of years." Captain Zrix's voice cut through the chaos. "Dr. Harrison, my sensors are detecting similar harmonic signatures from the other worlds on our evacuation list. Whatever you've triggered, it's spreading." Tommy's instruments confirmed it. Across the galaxy, on every world currently under Federation protection, Void Stalkers were emerging from their hibernation and joining the planetary song. "Admiral Corax," Harrison said calmly, "I believe you have a choice to make. You can continue trying to strip mine living worlds, in which case you're going to find yourself at war with a conservation system that spans half the galaxy. Or what, Dr. Harrison?" Harrison looked up at the Void Stalker, whose nearest eye seemed to focus on him with something approaching affection. "Or you can learn to work with the Guardians instead of against them. These creatures have been managing planetary ecosystems since before your species discovered fire. They know things about sustainable resource extraction that could revolutionize galactic industry." The mining fleet remained frozen in the harmonic field while Admiral Corax considered his options. Around the galaxy, Federation evacuation fleets were reporting similar encounters with awakened Void Stalkers. Finally, Admiral Corax's voice returned to the communications channel, carefully controlled but noticeably different. "Dr. Harrison, the Mineral Consortium is prepared to discuss alternative approaches to resource extraction. Perhaps we could arrange a meeting." Harrison smiled, looking out over a world that was no longer in danger of being strip-mined to death. "I think that can be arranged, Admiral. But you'll be negotiating with them, not us." The Void Stalkers' bioluminescent patterns pulsed with what Tommy's translation software identified as satisfaction. "Them?" Admiral Corax asked. "The actual owners of these worlds, Admiral. The ones who've been taking care of them for millions of years." As if to punctuate his point, the 7 Void Stalkers shifted their harmonic song to a new frequency, one that Tommy's instruments identified as a welcome greeting. "They're inviting you to land," Harrison translated, "under their protection." 6 months later, Dr. James Harrison stood in the observation deck of the newly constructed Kepler Research and Conservation Facility, watching Admiral Corax's mining teams work alongside a juvenile Void Stalker to extract rare minerals without disturbing the planetary ecosystem. The young Void Stalker, barely 200 meters long, used its specialized feeding appendages to show the miners how to access mineral deposits without damaging the delicate root networks that maintained soil stability. In return, the miners shared their knowledge of refined metallurgy, teaching the creature new techniques for mineral purification. "The Council's going to ratify the Planetary Guardian Accords next week," Tommy reported, joining Harrison at the observation window. 47 worlds have already signed on to the Conservation Partnership Program. "And the Mineral Consortium? Record profits," Jake added, settling into a chair with his own cup of coffee. "Turns out sustainable extraction yields higher quality materials with less processing overhead. Who would have thought?" Through the window, they could see Captain Zrix's ship docked at the new orbital station. The Vexian captain had become one of the most vocal advocates for the Guardian program, and his crew now included 2 Void Stalker communication specialists. "Any word from Earth?" Harrison asked. Tommy grinned. "The Colonial Administration wants us to establish Guardian contact protocols for every human colony world. Apparently, The idea of having million-year-old conservation experts as planetary neighbors appeals to them. And the Federation Science Council? They've reclassified Void Stalkers from extinction threat to protected species with full citizenship rights, Jake reported. Also, they want to give you the Galactic Peace Prize. Harrison chuckled. For discovering that the galaxy's most feared predators are actually its most dedicated environmentalists. For being the first person in galactic history to respond to a planetary-scale apex predator by asking, "How big?" Instead of running away screaming, Tommy corrected. Outside, the adult Void Stalker that had first made contact with them was tending to a new growth of bioluminescent coral that was slowly healing a damaged section of the continental shelf. Its massive form moved with deliberate care, each action calculated to support rather than disturb the ecosystem around it. "You know what the best part is?" Harrison said, watching the gentle giant work. "What's that, Doc?" "We're not just studying them anymore. We're learning from them. And they're learning from us. Real partnership." He raised his coffee cup in a toast. "To the stupidest scientific endeavor in human history. To the stupidest scientific endeavor in human history," his colleagues echoed. Below them, the Void Stalkers' bioluminescent patterns pulsed in what their translation software had learned to recognize as laughter. The galaxy, it turned out, was much more interesting when you stopped running away from the things that looked dangerous and started asking the right questions instead. And sometimes, the most important question was simply, "How big?"